Understanding CSS essentials, we're going to be looking at layouts and how to arrange the user interface content using CSS. This is the agenda. First off, we're looking at the user interface, then we'll be looking at the CSS box model, then the flex box model, and finally grid layouts. So the UI, or the user interface, is the portion of a web page where users interact. The layout of a user interface will dramatically impact user experience. Layouts can range from minimalist with just a few elements to pages that are jammed full with content. Simple layouts and complex layouts require different models to ensure that content displays properly for users. Vendor prefixes. Although these are not used quite as much as they were a few years ago, you do still come across them from time to time. So as with HTML5, some features of CSS3 might not be compatible with all browsers. New properties are being added all the time, while others are being modified. So many browsers offer alternative property names to work around any compatibility problems. So this ensures that a certain feature will work with that particular browser. These property names must be used in conjunction with a vendor prefix. A vendor prefix is simply a keyword that is surrounded by dashes. So let's have a look at the chart and see the different examples. For Internet Explorer, you would use the prefix MS. For Firefox, MOZ. Opera is just O. Chrome, WebKit, and Safari also WebKit. Let's have a look at vendor prefixes in action. To apply the Flexbox style to elements in a browser like Chrome, you simply add the WebKit Flexbox property to your CSS. A best practice is to include the property with all 4 vendor prefixes. This will increase the likelihood that your web page will render correctly. If you have questions about whether your property will display properly, then check out caniuse.com. Next up, let's look at the CSS box model. The CSS box model defines the rules for how content is formatted on a web page or web application. Each element of an HTML box is in a box that includes multiple components, padding, border, and a margin. Padding is the space between the content and its border. A border surrounds the box that content sits inside. A margin is the space that surrounds the box and sits between other boxes in a web document. Block level and inline elements. Within the CSS box model, there are 2 categories of elements: block level and inline. Block level elements create boxes that are part of a page's layout. This category includes articles, sections, paragraphs, headers, footers, and other things. Inline elements are used to format content. This category includes emphasis and boldface. On the right hand side, you have some examples of block level examples and inline examples. The parent-child relationship. Within the CSS box model, it is possible for a box to contain one or more boxes. The outer box is referred to as the parent, and inner box is referred to as a child. This is similar to nesting tags in HTML. A child inherits CSS styles from a parent, which means that styles applied to a parent will also apply to a child. This isn't the case for all CSS properties. There are some problems with the CSS box model. Some browsers tend to apply properties differently. For example, height and width are supposed to be separate attributes, but sometimes aren't treated as such by older browsers. Additionally, there are different ways that the padding and margin and border attributes are applied across different browsers. Let's look at flex boxes. The CSS flexbox model CSS3 now includes the Flexbox box model, a layout mode that provides flexibility when a user changes the size of their browser window. Elements, navigation bars, forms and pictures will resize and reposition automatically to fill available space. We use media queries to determine which device is being used. CSS uses this information to automatically adjust our HTML document to fit a screen. An element is defined as a flexbox using the display property. The display property possesses two values, flexbox and inline flexbox. The flexbox value sets the flexbox as a block level element. The inline flexbox value sets the flexbox as an inline level element. These are some of the flexbox properties and values. I'll let you have a look through these in your own time. You may want to pause the video. You can look into these more as well on W3 Schools. That's really the best way to learn how to use the different properties for flexboxes. Working with flexboxes. Flexboxes can contain other boxes or child boxes, which are referred to as flexbox items. With the flex property, you can make the flexbox items flexible as well. Recall that the display property is used to make parent boxes flexible. The flex property can be used to proportionally scale flexbox items when the flexbox increases or decreases in size. The flex direction property allows developers to change the direction of child boxes in a flexbox. It uses the row reverse, column and column reverse values. The flex wrap property determines if child boxes will wrap onto a new line when a window condenses. It uses the no wrap, wrap and wrap reverse values. The flex flow property sets the flex direction and flex wrap properties at the same time. For a flexbox demo, you can look at the example in your book. But again, I think the best place really to do this is on W3 Schools. So if you just search Flexbox on W3 Schools, and that will take you through some examples. Ordering and arranging content. The flex order property allows you to adjust the order and arrangement of contents inside of a flexbox. The property groups child boxes to control the order in which they appear in a layout. The default value for the flex order property is 0. To find out more about flexboxes, you can look at this link. But again, I would recommend looking at W3 Schools. That is really the best and most up-to-date source of information about flexboxes. Let's have a look at grid layouts. When the flexbox model isn't appropriate, you can also use the grid layout model. You can see this on the right hand side. The grid layout model uses CSS to structure content using rows and columns. Grids are extremely flexible and provide an easier to use option for organizing content than HTML tables. They also give a much nicer appearance to the website. Grid layouts and grid items. So grid layouts are very similar to tables because they feature rows and columns. They're best suited for more complex layouts like those required by newspapers than flexboxes can handle. The content in grid layouts are also modular, which allows you to move content from one part of the page to another. How do we define the grid layout? You can define the grid layout by using the display property along with the grid or inline grid values. Child elements in a grid are called grid items, which can then be positioned according to grid tracks, grid lines, or grid cells. The table below describes three basic layout concepts: grid tracks, which are the columns and rows of a grid; grid lines, which are the horizontal and vertical lines that separate columns and rows; and grid cells, which are the logical space where the content is placed. The grid properties and values are displayed over the next few slides. I would again recommend looking at W3 Schools to see the most up-to-date information on this. You may want to pause the video to take a closer look at these properties and their values and descriptions. There's a grid layout demo in the book, and again you can find other demos on W3 Schools. You can also find some more information at the Microsoft link on the page. To summarize, we've looked at the user interface, particularly at the CSS box model, the flex box model, and grid layouts.